So as Victoria mentioned, I'm Joe Lipa. I'm from HATS Academic Integrations, and we're a group within Michigan Medicine's central IT department that focuses on custom data integration and automation solutions. So um, this mobile data ingestion pipeline is kind of a pilot we've begun to kind of explore what's possible. Um, and I noticed on the call, actually, I think I see Elizabeth Mills and Colin Sheldon. So they're very familiar with this because we've worked with them with some of the initial projects that led us to think, could we turn this framework of mobile data ingestion into a service that's more broadly accessible to Michigan medicine researchers to help them with kind of more seamless transfer of mobile data health data from third-party collection platforms to, wherever they need it for analysis. So I'd like to give a lot of credit to my colleague Siqing Hu, who's not on the call right now, but she has done a ton of work developing some of these pipelines already for mainly the SEN lab. So we have the intern health study, IHS, and then um, Prompt and Compass, which Elizabeth and Colin will be able to speak to. That's really their world. So feel free to chime in, Elizabeth and Colin, if you have any specific comments. But with these initial three kind of studies that we've helped develop a pipeline for, they're pulling in so much data. There's Apple Health data, there's Fitbit data, Garmin data, Google Fit, Apple Sensor Kit, there's geographic data, and then there's even custom survey data. And so it got us kind of thinking, can we scale these initial pipelines into a service that we could make accessible to any researcher who might need it? And the second question is there demand for that, right? There's kind of the can we and then should we? So that's what we've tried to evaluate with this pilot, and it's ongoing. I will stress it's still early. We're still looking into possible solutions, and so I'm very interested to hear from you all, what potential pilots might be out there and what they might look like. Currently, all of our pipelines are for Carev My Data Helps. And there are other supported mobile data collection platforms, um, obviously, that people are using. And so we want to find out, is this something we could support as well? So, for example, there's Avicenna, there's XBWell, Metrics Wire, which I think Gabriel, correct me if I'm wrong, but the next several MDEN sessions are devoted to these platforms. Probably a deeper dive, I'd assume, in how to use them. And then there's also Kestrel. And so together with My Data Helps, these five are the vendors that the Mobile Technologies Core has selected as the quote unquote preferred vendors for U of M studies. So it doesn't mean you can't use other platforms, but these are the ones that I know Victoria and Gabrielle have done a lot of work. And actually, I see some uh, other people on the call who were in these initial meetings where we tried to narrow down all the potential vendors into which are the ones that U of M is going to select as like our preferred or recommended vendor, especially for new studies. So they would have the IA approval, they would have documentation to just help researchers get up to speed very quickly when doing these kinds of mobile data health studies. So today I'm going to just walk through our first pilot project, kind of like as a case study. So it was for the Michigan Trauma Quality Improvement Program, MTQIP. Try to say that without defaulting to Q-tip. That was a challenge to rewire my brain because it looks a lot like Q-tip. But MTQIP, they're a program in general surgery. And for this specific study, they're using My Data Helps to collect wearable health device data. So sleep data, steps data, and they're doing this for a cohort of trauma patients post-discharge. And they're planning to analyze the data in Stata and Tableau. So we looked at what are the possible ways we could enable access to this data in a format that they can easily analyze? So we came up with three potential solutions. And I'll just walk through those briefly. I think these can be generalized to a lot of different studies, and as we'll see in a minute, we actually already have some of these running for Compass and Prompt and IHS. But the first option is just the most basic. So it's just a very simple overview of how it works. The blue box is My Data Helps, the project, and they have a feature where you can turn on weekly incremental exports. So in this case, it was every Sunday, and it exports zip CSV files. So these we would SFTP to the MyShare server, and I know MyShare is being replaced. I think the name is going to remain MyShare, but the underlying technology is currently in the process of transitioning. But same idea. And we have an hourly transfer task set up to basically route the data to a shared folder. And then we set up an automated transfer to the study team's shared folder. And so this is currently running every week. So basically, you get the incremental data, it's routed to the shared folder, and then from there we have an automated task to route it to the study team. And it's in the form of raw CSV files when you unzip the main file. And the idea is that you can then connect whatever your analysis tool, in this case, Stata, to those CSV files. So very simple, very basic, getting the data to the researcher without much other fanfare. According to this setup, so as I mentioned, it delivers CSV files. The study team is responsible for doing a number of things to kind of get the data in a format for analysis. So they would need to unzip the weekly exports, and then because it's incremental data, it's only the past week of data. So the study team would need to combine the CSV files into master files that contain all of the data. And then, of course, connect your tool of analysis, in this case, Stata, to that combined data set with all of the data. Second option, so for those on the call familiar with Prompt and Compass, this is going to look very familiar. It's a connection to a database that is hosted within Michigan Medicine that we would set up and enable basically the transfer of the data and the loading into the database. So the first part with the blue square is going to look very similar. You have the weekly incremental exports from My Data Helps. You have the SFTP to the MyShare server and the hourly transfer task to get it to our shared folder. And then we have a little bit more involved process, and I should say a lot more involved process, to unload and unzip the CSVs and to get them into the Oracle database, and also to combine them all into a master table containing all of the data for each of the various components. And then that Oracle database, of course, you can connect to it from whatever analysis tool you're using. So R, Stata, Python, SAS, or Tableau for visualization. And so it looks a little bit different, right? The study team is not interacting directly with CSV files. Instead, it's database tables. And there's stored procedures running in the background as part of that daily automation to basically load the raw data, error check it, and then put it into the final tables for analysis that the study team has access to. So in this case, the study team, they'll need an Oracle database schema. They'll need credentials to log in. They'll need a way to access the database. So we usually recommend SQL Developer. And then they'll have to set up that ODBC connection to the Oracle database from whatever tool they're using for analysis. And then it might also require some basic SQL skills to extract the data from the tables in the desired format, maybe build some custom views. So all of that might, again, require some basic knowledge in SQL. The third option, this one is intriguing because there's no actual transfer of data. It's a direct connection to the My Data Helps cloud database. So as we're uh, transitioning more to cloud-based solutions, this one was very intriguing because My Data Helps is storing the data in an AWS cloud database and has enabled an ODBC connection directly into the database that you could connect to right from whatever tool you're using for analysis. So you could make a connection right from Tableau into the AWS database. You will still have to download and configure the ODBC driver and the DSN. And by default, the credentials, at least that My Data Helps provides, they're only valid for 12 hours at a time. So you would need to rotate your credentials when you're making a new connection after 12 hours. So according to this framework, the study team has kind of some different responsibilities. They'd have to maintain that credentials file. They'd have to set up the ODBC driver and configure the DSN and then connect to the database from whatever tool they're using. And then they might have to filter the data as needed. So again, maybe some custom SQL or R code to do that filtering. So those are just in a nutshell, the three kind of solutions that we came up for this initial pilot of how could we get the study team access to the data from My Data Helps. And this is just a summary of the pros and cons of each, right? Starting from the simplest, option one, to kind of maybe the most, you could say, modern with the cloud database. Option number two is probably the most complex from the data integration point of view, because again, we're doing that filtering, we're doing that combining of the data into a master data set. And of course, testing, right? Some of them, I confess, I don't use data, so theoretically it should work, but I haven't actually tested the cloud connection into Stata. I have for R, it seemed to work fine. Tableau, usually you want to connect to a raw database instead of the CSV files. Maybe some study teams have a lot of knowledge in SQL, and so they're perfectly willing to take on that SQL aspect. Maybe they don't. Maybe they're just very comfortable with CSV files, and that's all they really need. So in this case, the outcome of the MTQIP pilot, we presented all three options to the study team, and they ultimately chose the first option, the direct data file transfer, that it was best meeting the needs that they had. They did just want the raw CSV files. They didn't necessarily want to worry about connecting to a relational database. And they didn't need very frequent data refreshes. So this is very different from the IHS, the Compass, the prompt studies, where we have a daily refresh going. And so there's a need for much more real-time data. Also very different. In this case, the cohort was very small. I know for IHS and Compass, the cohort is huge. This cohort, I think, was currently under a dozen patients. Obviously, it's going to grow with time, but for now, just the direct file transfer, the sizes of the CSV files were very manageable. So we obviously recognize future studies could and certainly will require very different solutions. And so our goal here is to remain flexible while enabling a repeatable pipeline infrastructure. So obviously this depends on there being other potential studies that might be able to make use of this kind of pipeline. So if you have other potential pilots in mind, definitely let us know. We want to hear from you, maybe get in touch with that study team and see if we can do something similar for them as we seek to continue to develop this mobile data ingestion service.